Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from July 5th, 2024, and I'm recording this on January 2nd, 2025. Happy New Year to all of you. A little late. I hope 2024 was good to you and 2025 is even better. As always, also, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week we look at these two lists to see what books were moving in the market, what books people were chasing, were jumping in value, and see what factors were affecting them then, and just 6 months later, what factors are affecting them now and how they've separated in the market. Are they still hot? Have they dropped back? Should you have been patient? Should you have bought in? So that's what we do here. We've been doing it in a couple of weeks for 6 years. We're almost there, which is just sort of insane to me that it's going to be that long. But yeah, here in just a couple of weeks, we will have been doing this for 6 years. So because of that, I will say a little something about the channel here. Reminder to everyone that I do have memberships now. So if you want to help support the channel, help me keep doing this, as everything, my costs related to this have went up. I'd really appreciate it. So please support the channel if you can. With that, let's dig into this list and see if we can learn anything this week. I will say this, I don't know that we're going to learn a lot this week, as you'll see by how not hot some of these books were in terms of jumping in value. But anyway, let's dig in and see what we can find out. First up, we have Proof #1. This is the second week in a row this hit the list because it was optioned by Fox. Last week when we talked about it, it was like a $45 to $120 book. But this weekend, it kind of tightened up in its values in terms of it was a $65 to $100 book. So the top end was a little lower, the bottom end was a little higher, still lots of sales. So people were still betting on this book. Now it's a $20 to $40 book. So still a dumpster fire. You're talking about a book that was averaging around 80 something, now being around 30 something on average. Yeah, still a dumpster fire, although at 20 to 40, really good for an option news book this much later. So next we have Mindset #1. This was optioned for TV by Don Cheadle's production company. So that's why I was hitting the list. There was a lot of sales, but it really wasn't going for very much. You will notice that I didn't get to check values this week. This was when I was on my hiatus back in the summer for personal reasons. So I'm going off of what they said in the videos. I couldn't actually check. This one, according to Tom, was only averaging $4. It's $2 to $6 now, so that's steady. I mean, it's the same price, but it's definitely an I'll be back because there was no reason to have bought it then. Next, we have Vicious Circle #1. This was optioned by Universal with Ryan Coogler attached to potentially direct this. Raw copies were going for 10 to 20 back then. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, so a down and an I'll be back. This one, again, no reason to have chased and easily backed up. Borderline trap on this one here. So yeah, like most option news books, no reason to chase them in the moment because it's going to be a long time before they come out. All right, next up we have Hellboy, The Crooked Man #1. And this was hitting the list because the movie was coming out. Hellboy, The Crooked Man, which I admittedly was very distracted around this time, but I didn't even know a Hellboy, The Crooked Man movie came out. So, and then I looked at the ratings and reviews, and it didn't do well, both critics and the public. Back then it was a $15 to $20 book. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. So overall, we'll just call it steady and I'll be back. I think this is a popular Hellboy story anyway. So the movie didn't really hurt the value here too much, but yeah, it's no reason to have paid 15 to 20, even though that's still where the high end of these go. Next, we have Sandman #19. This was hitting the list because they were ramping up production on season 2, and we got casting news for Puck, who is a fairly popular Sandman character, and we got the news that the actor who played Joffrey in Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones was coming back to acting, and he had been cast as Puck. Raw copies here were still only going like $8 back then, 9.869. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, 9.8, 50 to 75, so steady and worth it. And with the 3 steady and worth it we've had so far, I think you'll see the pattern of why we have a lot of steady books this week. And we had a $4 book that was going for 2 to 6. We had a $15 to $20 book that was 5 to 20. We had an $8 book that was going 5 to 15. These books didn't really jump a whole lot in value at the time, so it's part of why these books are still very steady. All right, with that, we're going to move into covers. We have Sonic the Hedgehog, number 70, first appearance of Phantom Racer. This is the Nathalie Forderin 1 in 10. $15 back then for 1 in 10. Not a great sign, but it's still a $10 to $20 book. So, yeah, so it did not crash. Only one 9.8 sale for 100. So another steady and worth it. Slightly over ratio, which is pretty good for 1 in 10 to stay ratio to double 6 months later, but not a lot of huge value here either. Next, we have Grommets number 2, the Alex Regal 1 in 10. So another 1 in 10 hitting the list. Back then, Grommets was, we've already talked about Grommets number 1 several times. We've talked about some later Grommets here more recently. This 1 in 10, when it came out, was going for 25 to 35, which is really good for a 1 in 10 right out the gate. Now, I don't know what to say about this. Only 4 recent sales. 50 to 62, $50, $62 for raw copies. 9.8s went for 37 and 40. So 9.8, the 2 recent 9.8 sales were less than the 2 raw sales, but the last sale period goes all the way back to November 6th. Listings are currently at 40, and not really starting at around 40 for a raw copy and not moving. But this is steady. I don't know. You could throw this in almost any category. Clearly people, they're still asking more than it was going for back then, but clearly people aren't willing to pay that, even though there were a few sales in late October, early November above that for raw copies, even though 9.8 actually went for less than those. So kind of an odd one. I think there's probably a market here, but my guess is it's going to have to be back down in the range of where it was at originally at like a $20 to $30 book as opposed to these $40, $50, $60 listings. So next we have Action Comics number 1066. The Mark Spears 1 in 25. So a Mark Spears variant that was very popular when it came out of the gate at 50 to 70, despite Lobo looking like he had troll hair. I think Ryan brought that up on the video when I was rewatching to make this list together, and I was like, oh my gosh, he does. But I couldn't unsee it after he said that. But like anything Mark Spears, since the Monsters book started coming out, this one is doing way better. This is an up and straight cash. So 50 to 70 back then is now $125 to $200 for raw books. Only 1 recent 9.8 sale for $200. But yeah, and this book really, like to give you an idea, really exploded since mid-December. Toward the end of November, beginning of December, it was a $50 to $100 book, 9.8, $100 to $150. So really good. And you can almost still argue up from 6 months ago, but it has taken off here in the last few weeks as people have just started looking for anything Mark Spears. Next, we have Detective Comics number 1086, the Sebastian Fulmara 1 in 25, which was going for 40 to 60. Double ratio. That usually means a trap. This one's a trap. It's now a $20 to $30 book, which is pretty much the exact pattern we see for these 1 in 25s most of the time. Next, we have Moon Knight, The Fist of Khonshu, number 1, the surprise variant by Alexandro Capuccio. I butchered that name. I butcher a lot of names on here. I apologize to anybody whose name I messed up, but I do it a lot. This book was going for 40 to 100 then. It was on the list last week, and last week it was a $95 to $150 book. So this book had already dropped in value, even though there were still lots of sales when it hit the list the second time. It was already coming down from that $95 to $150 a week ago. By this point, it was 40 to 100, and now it's a $10 to $25 book. This has definitely become a dumpster fire. There was plenty of these out there, apparently, for demand, and yeah, the initial thought that this was going to be hard to get didn't pan out for folks. With that, we got one pure just comic buzz book, and that is Batman number 125. This is the first appearance of Failsafe, the start of the Chip Zdarsky run on Batman. Raw copies were going for $5. 9.8 going for 66. Wonder if this will be steady since it was basically going for cover. And this was hitting the list because Absolute Power was about to start and Failsafe was going to be a big part of it. Lots of sales on this book, but no value. Still a $5 book, still a $60 to $70, 9.8. Yeah, steady and I'll be back, which has been a lot of our theme this week. Next, we have The Terrifics, number 1, first team appearance of The Terrifics. And this hit the list because James Gunn tweeted about The Terrifics. So everybody went out and started trying to buy the Terrifics book because surely that means there'll be a movie or something in 5 to 10 years. Anyway, $10 to $20 back then, 9.8, 100. Now it's a $4 to $15 book with most of the sales under 10. 9.8, 85 to 110, so right around that same range. So not a lot of change there, but not very many sales. So overall, we'll call this down and I'll be back. No reason to have chased in that moment. Next, we have Superman number 32 on the list for the second week in a row. First appearance of Ulysses, and set photos were coming out on the Superman movie, and people were specking the guy in the black gray suit that you can't see his face is going to be Ulysses. So that's why people were chasing this book. $10 to $12 back then, 9.8 only 40. So not a lot of value there, but lots of sales. Noticing a pattern here. Now it's a $2 to $15 book. So we're going to call this steady and I'll be back. Most of the sales are under that $10 floor from before, but there are still a few $10+ sales. So with that, we're moving into MCU, and we got this first one's sort of. It is Wolverine related, which is what everything was Wolverine and Deadpool related back then that was hitting the list. But this is X-Men number 11, and this is the Jim Lee Wolverine cover. And this was, Tom and them were talking about it because of Jim Lee announced that he was going to do commissions, but then everyone was complaining that his commission prices were way, way too high. Which, yeah, if you're like a normal human being and you wanted one, they were way, way too high. But I guarantee you people paid for them. So, and he probably didn't want to do that many. So, yeah, he probably accomplished exactly what he wanted to, which meant, base collectors weren't going to get them, but he didn't want to do that many anyway. So, raw copies were going for 20 on this book back then, 9.8 going for 80. Again, I guess controversy was why this is on the list. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, 9.8, 70. Down and then I'll be back overall, but yeah, it's not really down that much. A great Jim Lee cover, and, supply and demand. He can charge whatever people are willing to pay, and that's what he did. Next, we have actually MCU related, maybe not. We got Uncanny X-Men number 150, The Origin of Magneto, and I guess this was on the list because people were thinking that Deadpool Wolverine was going to open the door for the X-Men, which I guess it does, but again, I don't know, like the last one, the justification for why this was on the list was a little weird. Raw, $8, 9.8, 98 for a 1981 book. Now it's a $2 to $15 book, 9.8, 125, which is up a little bit, but only the one sale. Steady and worth it, I guess. Again, another book that really, I guess it was a slow week is all I could say around the July 4th holiday. Next, we actually related to Wolverine and Deadpool. We have Wolverine number 10, and this is, of course, a classic Wolverine versus Sabretooth fight, and we'd got confirmation in the trailer that they were going to fight, that Tyler Mane's Sabretooth was going to be back in the movie. Raw copies, $20, 9.8, 127. Now it's a $10 to $30 book, 9.8, 1 to 140, because that's basically what the value of this book has been for a long time. I know it's steady and worth it, but this is where this book is sad. It just had a bunch of sales. It didn't really jump in value. Next, we have Uncanny X-Men number 213, another Wolverine versus Sabretooth, and another book that was selling lots of copies, but at the price it always sells them for. So raw copies 25, 9.8, 128. Raw copies now are 10 to 25, 9.8, 125 to 150. So another steady and I'll be back. And we're just going to keep with this trend of books that were selling copies but not really changing value. And we got Deadpool, The Circle Chase number 1, first Deadpool solo miniseries. raw copies were going 20 back then, 9.8 going 125, which amazingly is about what they normally do. And raw copies now are 10 to 30. 9.8s though in this book have actually jumped 170 to 220. So that's a significant upward trend in the 9.8s, but there's only like 3 or 4 sales. So I still went with Steady and Worth It because the vast majority of raw copies were in the same price range it was back then. So that is this week's list. Not sure we learned much other than books that go for the value they've always gone for, or still going for that value 6 months later. When a book just has a lot of sales but doesn't increase in value, you don't really see much change. I want to thank you guys for watching. I'm about to sneeze, so I'm going to wrap this up quick. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.